The wind carried the scent of dust and distance across the plains that afternoon, wrapping the small town of Clearwater in a haze of golden light. A single wagon creaked its way down the dirt road, its wheels slicing through dry earth as though cutting open the silence itself. The townsfolk, few as they were, peeked from shaded porches, curious but pretending not to be. No one ever came to Clearwater unless they were running from something, or running toward something they didn't understand. Eli Carter leaned against the wooden post outside the blacksmith's shop, his hat tilted low against the sun. He'd spent the morning fixing the south fence on his ranch, the one the coyotes liked to test, and his shirt still carried the scent of sweat and saddle leather. When the wagon stopped in front of the general store, he barely looked up until he saw her. The woman stepped down from the wagon, her pale blue dress catching the late sunlight, her bonnet slightly crooked from travel. She hesitated, gripping the side of the wagon as though the earth beneath her. Boots wasn't real yet. Her face was streaked with the dust of miles and the tears of 1,000 doubts. Her eyes, red-rimmed but bright, searched the street as though looking for something she wasn't sure existed anymore. The driver tipped his hat, handed her a small bag, and said something too soft for Eli to hear. Then he flicked the reins and the wagon rattled away, leaving her standing alone, swallowed by the emptiness. Eli's chest tightened, though he couldn't say why. Maybe it was the way her shoulders trembled when she exhaled. Or maybe it was because he knew that kind of look, the one people get when they've lost everything they had and still have to keep going. She caught sight of him then, her gaze snapping to his like a startled bird. For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other, two strangers on the same patch of ground, bound by some invisible thread. He straightened and took a few steps toward her. "You all right, ma'am?" Her voice was soft and strained. "Are you Mr. Eli Carter?" He nodded slowly. "That's me." She swallowed hard, fingers clutching her shawl. "I'm Clara. Clara Whitfield. I came from St. Louis." Eli's brow furrowed. "St. Louis?" She nodded again, trying to smile, but the tremble in her lip betrayed her. "You sent for me." Her voice broke on the last word. "I'm your bride." The world seemed to go still around them. The distant sound of a hammer in the blacksmith's shop stopped. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Eli stared at her, the confusion clear in his eyes. "I think there's been some mistake," he said finally, his voice low, careful. "I never sent for a bride." Her shoulders sank, and for a moment, she looked as though the air had been knocked out of her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That can't be right. I have letters." "Your letters? You wrote to me for months. You said you'd build us a home near the river, that you'd name it after me." Eli felt something twist inside him. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I don't know who's been writing you, but it wasn't me." Her hand went to her chest, as though trying to keep her heart from falling apart right there on the dusty street. Tears welled in her eyes again, but she blinked them back, biting her lip. "No," she said again, softer this time. "It can't be." Eli wanted to look away, but he couldn't. He'd seen pain before, on battlefields, in droughts, in the eyes of men, burying their families. But there was something about this woman's quiet heartbreak that tore through him like a storm. He stepped closer, his voice gentler than it had been in years. "You don't have to pretend with me." Clara looked up at him, startled. "Pretend?" He nodded. "You're scared, lost. I can see that. But you don't have to act like you got it altogether just because you're standing in front of a stranger. You've come a long way, ma'am. Let yourself breathe." That did it. The tears came silent but fierce. She turned her face away, pressing a hand to her mouth, but her shoulders shook. Eli didn't touch her, didn't say another word. He just stood there letting her cry, watching the dust dance around them in the light of the setting sun. When she finally managed to speak, her voice was raw. "I sold everything. My mother's locket, my father's farm. I thought I was coming here to start a new life." Eli looked at her for a long moment before taking off his hat and running a hand through his hair. "Well," he said quietly, "you're here now. That counts for something." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "I suppose it does, but I've got nowhere to go, no one to turn to." Eli's gaze shifted toward the open plain, where the sky was starting to bleed orange and red. "There's a spare room in the ranch house," he said at last. "Ain't much, but it's dry and safe. You can stay there till we figure things out." She blinked, surprised. "You'd let me stay?" After all this?" "Ma'am," he said, putting his hat back on, "you came here in good faith. Ain't right to turn you out because of someone else's lie. For the first time, she smiled, a faint, uncertain thing, like sunlight trying to break through storm clouds. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded, motioning toward his horse tied up by the post. It's a bit of a ride to the ranch. Hope you don't mind getting your skirt dusty. Clara looked down at her dress and laughed softly through her tears. I think it's already past saving. Eli chuckled, a deep, quiet sound that felt foreign to him after so long. Fair enough. As they rode out toward the horizon, the town behind them faded into the shadows. The wagon tracks stretched like scars across the earth, and above them, the sky burned with the colors of endings and beginnings. Clara held tight to the saddle, her heart a storm of grief and fragile hope. She'd come here expecting a husband, a home, a future written in someone else's promises. Instead, she'd found a man who didn't owe her anything, and yet treated her with more kindness than anyone ever had. And Eli, though he didn't say it aloud, felt something stir inside him too. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was recognition, or maybe it was the first flicker of something he hadn't dared to feel since the war. Something like faith. By the time they reached the ranch, the stars were out, scattered across the velvet sky. The small cabin stood waiting, humble but strong, its windows glowing with the faint warmth of lamplight. Clara dismounted, her legs trembling, and looked up at the house. That was not meant to be hers, but for the first time since stepping off that wagon, she didn't feel entirely alone. Eli opened the door and gestured for her to go in first. You'll be safe here, he said. Rest tonight. We'll figure out the rest in the morning. She turned to him, her eyes still wet but steadier now. You're a good man, Mr. Carter. He hesitated, his voice low and rough. Just a man trying to do what's right. As the door closed behind her, Eli stood under the wide western sky, staring into the dark. He didn't know who had written those letters or why fate had brought this broken woman to his doorstep, but he had a feeling that whatever it wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning came slow and golden, with the kind of silence that feels almost sacred. The prairie stretched endlessly, covered in dew that shimmered under the first kiss of sunlight. A rooster crowed in the distance, and somewhere a coyote answered, its cry lonely and haunting. Inside Eli Carter's ranch house, Clara stirred awake to the smell of coffee and cornbread. For a moment she forgot where she was. The wooden beams above her head, the wool blanket pulled to her chin, the faint hum of the wind through the cracks. All of it felt like a dream stitched together from pieces of two different lives. Then it came back. The wagon, the letters, the lie. She sat up slowly, pressing a hand to her heart, steadying herself against the rush of it all. Through the small window she saw Eli outside, tending to the horses. The sunlight caught his profile, strong, steady, carved from the kind of quiet strength that comes only from loss and endurance. He moved with the calm certainty of a man who'd seen too much to rush anymore. Clara rose, washed her face, and stepped outside, her boots crunching on the dirt. Eli looked up, offering her a small nod. Mornin', Miss Whitfield. Mornin', she said softly. Thank you for everything, he shrugged. Ain't much, just breakfast and a roof. That's more than I had yesterday. A brief silence settled between them, filled with the sound of wind rustling through the grass. Clara looked toward the horizon. You live a quiet life out here. Eli smiled faintly. Quiet's the only kind I know. They ate in silence for a while, sitting on the porch. Clara tried to eat, but her thoughts kept circling back to the letters. The way they'd sounded, so kind, so sure, so real. Someone had written her every week for nearly 6 months. They'd known her favorite flower, her dreams of running a small homestead, even the scar on her wrist from falling off a horse as a girl. Whoever had done it hadn't just lied. They'd studied her. Finally, she spoke. I'd like to see the town again. Maybe talk to the postmaster. Eli nodded slowly. Figured you might say that. He leaned back in his chair. I'll saddle up after breakfast. We'll ride in together. When they reached Clearwater, the same people who'd watched Clara arrive the day before now whispered behind half-raised hands. Eli ignored them, leading his horse to the hitching post outside the post office. Clara followed close, clutching the bundle of letters she'd kept in her satchel. Inside, the air smelled of ink and old paper. Mr. Greeley, the postmaster, looked up from his ledger, adjusting his spectacles. Well, morning, Mr. Carter, miss. Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. Sir, I received a series of letters from this town. From a man claiming to be Eli Carter. Do you remember posting them? Mr. Greeley frowned, reaching for the letters she handed him. He scanned the handwriting, his brow furrowing deeper with every page. This ain't Eli's handwriting, that's for sure. Eli crossed his arms. You recognize it? The old man hesitated. I might. He looked between them, uneasy. You sure you want to know who sent these? Clara's voice was firm now. I have to know. Mr. Greeley sighed, setting the letters down. These were dropped off by a young man. Name of Jacob Turner. Said he was helping you out, Eli, while you were too busy with the ranch to write. Didn't think much of it at the time. Eli's face hardened, his jaw tightening. Jacob Turner's my foreman. Been with me near 2 years. Clara's eyes widened. He wrote them? But why? Eli didn't answer right away. He just turned and strode out the door, his boots striking the wood hard. Clara followed him into the sunlight, heart pounding. Eli! He stopped, his back rigid. Stay here, Clara. I'll handle this. No, she said, stepping closer. This concerns me too. He hesitated, then nodded once. All right, but stay close. They found Jacob at the barn, loading feed into the wagon. He looked up, surprised. Boss, didn't expect you back so soon. Eli didn't waste time. You been writing letters, Jacob? To this lady here pretending to be me? Jacob froze, his face paling. Eli, Answer me. Jacob swallowed hard. Yes, I wrote them. Clara felt the world tilt again. Why? Jacob's voice cracked. Because you wouldn't. You're a good man. Eli, but you've been alone too long. Every night I'd see you out here, sitting by the fire, talking to no one. You lost everything in that war. Your brother, your folks, and you stopped living. When I found her ad in the paper, I thought maybe. He looked at Clara. Maybe she could bring you back. To life. Eli's fists clenched at his sides. So you lied to her. Used my name. Made her cross half the country for a ghost. Jacob stepped forward, desperate. I never meant to hurt her. I thought when she got here, maybe you'd see she belonged here. That she belonged with you. Clara's voice was cold, trembling with pain. You had no right to decide that for either of us. Jacob bowed his head. I know. And I'll carry that shame. For a long time, no one spoke. Only the wind moved through the open barn door, whispering through the hay. Finally, Eli said quietly, Pack your things. You're done here. Jacob looked up, eyes shining with guilt. Eli, please. I said you're done. His voice was firm, final. Go. Jacob nodded, tears streaking the dust on his face. He walked past them, leading his horse out into the open plain. Neither Eli nor Clara turned to watch him go. When he was gone, Clara stood there, holding the letters in her hands. All this time, she whispered. All those words. None of them real. Eli turned to her, his voice soft but steady. Maybe the words weren't real, Clara, but what you did, that was. You believed in something enough to come all this way. That takes courage most folks never find. She looked up at him then. Truly looked. At the man who hadn't written a single word to her. Yet stood before her with more honesty than anyone ever had. You're kind, Mr. Carter, she said. Kinder than I deserve. He smiled faintly. Don't reckon kindness is something folks earn. You just give it where it's needed. For the next few days, Clara stayed on the ranch. She helped with the cooking, mended old shirts, and even learned how to milk the goats. Eli found himself smiling more, talking more. The quiet between them no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like peace. One evening, as the sun dipped low, they stood on the porch watching the sky turn to fire. Clara broke the silence. I suppose I should head east soon. Find work, start over. Eli's chest tightened. You could, he said slowly. Or you could stay. She turned to him, eyes wide. Stay? He nodded. Not because of what happened. Not out of pity. But because you've got a place here now, if you want it. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were soft, grateful. You'd really want me to stay? He looked at her, the wind tugging at his shirt, the dying sun painting his face in gold. Clara, he said quietly, you don't have to pretend with me. Not anymore. Something in her broke open then, not with pain this time, but with release. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of him. Maybe, she whispered, this is where I was meant to end up all along. Eli smiled, a real one this time, the kind that reached his eyes. Maybe so? The prairie stretched before them, vast and unending. The stars began to bloom overhead one by one, as if the heavens themselves were listening. Two broken souls had found each other in the dust. Not. through lies, but through the truth that rose from them. And sometimes that was enough.